What's going down, everybody? It's your boy, That Guy Mile High, tuning back in for another reaction. Happy Halloween. I don't think I said that in any of the other videos that we did today, but it is Halloween. Happy Halloween to everybody out there. If you're supposed to say Happy Halloween, is that really is Halloween really supposed to be a happy thing when everybody's like supposed to be monsters and shit? Shouldn't it be like creepy Halloween or scary Halloween or I don't know. Anyways. Let's give a big shout out to all the members real quick. And we're going to jump into this video called Horrifying Haunted Houses That Take It Too Far by Mr. Nightmare. Shout out to Mr. Nightmare. Mr. Pay It Forward, Sam, Christy Poe, Keith, Trey 420, Holla Boy, Manly, Epic, Misty, Jamal, Funny Farm, Driver Thoughts, Kara, Happy Chick, Holla Girl, Taylor, Marla, Diesel, Nick, Creatively Insane, Nicole, Aaron, Mama Dukes, Robin Lynn, Amy Jane Doe, Liz, Nugget, My Hood Life, and Gary. Gang, gang, gang. You dig what I'm saying? If y'all want to join the gang, hit that, think about hitting that join button. There's 3 different options to choose from. If not, and none of that fits your budget, and you're like, nah, bruh, go ahead and do it the free 99 way. Hit the subscribe, hit the bell notification, because again, it's free 99, so there's no excuses. It don't have to fit in your budget because it fits everyone's budget, okay? Anyways, let's go ahead and jump into this video now and see what's going down. Let go.
Before getting into the topic of today's video, I want to thank Rocket Money for sponsoring this video.
All right, shout out to Rocket Money, but we want to hear the stories now. Shout out to you and your sponsorship, Rocket Money.
Haunted house on this list is Dead of Night. Dead of Night was an attraction run by the Chamber of Horrors on Long Island, New York that closed in 2015. It was regarded as one of New York's most extreme haunted houses, and it had one of the most horrifying haunt openings many had ever seen. Everyone waited in lines, listening to a calming pre-recorded message saying, "We are here for your protection.
Everything will be okay. You are safe. We are here to protect you and care for you. We love you.
What kind of creepy shit is that, bro?"
Which was interrupted at intervals by an air raid siren and men in gas masks and suits who each grabbed an unsuspecting patron and dragged them into the attraction. However, you'd be lucky if you were dragged in. Some people were zipped into body bags and some were thrown over actors' shoulders and carried in. The attraction opened with this very strong abduction scenario. Then the focus shifted to humiliation, which included the smearing of strange substances on patrons' faces and even hitting people in the face with large and painfully heavy objects. Dead of Night has been discontinued from the Chamber of Horrors, but people to this day still hope to see it return.
What? Nah,
in Chicago, Illinois, there's a haunted house called Miasma, which is...
First off, would you go visit that creepy shit? That's not even like, oh, that would be creepy and crazy. Like, that just sounded like you have to have a kink and like to be beat up and dominated and be put into these weird hostage situations and shit. Like, that sounds like some kinky shit that you have to be into to have any sort of enjoyment out of that, bro. Because that doesn't sound like any sort of psychological, you know, fuckery that I would want to be a part of, okay?
Just as extreme, if not more extreme, than Dead of Night. Miasma is restricted to those 18 and older, and patrons may only enter alone. Patrons will be restrained, blindfolded, smeared with blood, endure heavy physical contact, and more. It's invite only, however, and patrons who receive an invite commonly describe the instructions in the email to be very vague but clear, and that was to not share the location of where they're going with anyone, to show up alone, and do not show up late. If the instructions were ever disregarded, the experience would end. All guests are asked to refrain from sharing details of the experience, making it harder to get many details about what goes on inside.
That sounds like some shit where it's like some real life Saw shit where motherfuckers are going to really like die and shit and get kidnapped. Like, that sounds like some human trade shit right there, bro. Like, no.
Some patrons have described their experiences to involve physical pain, often leaving with claw marks on their skin, psychological torture, emotional distress, and a lot of violence. Miasma can be very physically demanding, forcing patrons to sometimes crawl through tight spaces. One patron said she at one point forgot she was in a haunted house and tapped out when it started to feel like she was genuinely in a life or death situation. The location isn't even revealed to guests until 24 hours prior, and allegedly the location always changes. Scarehouse, the basement.
That's wild.
Underneath the regular tamer attraction known as Scarehouse in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, used to lie what was known as the basement at Scarehouse, which was a much more intense, immersive, and interactive experience than that of the one upstairs. And it was held inside a nearly 100-year-old historic and apparently actually haunted building It's been closed since COVID, but it's rumored to be returning soon. You may enter in pairs or alone, though odds are not many people will be entering this place alone. The actors in this haunted house are incredibly convincing, and there's a lot of improvisation and dialogue as you make your way through each scene of what's basically your own personal real-life horror movie. It's not possible to make it from start to end without coming into contact and having to deal with the actors stopping you and messing around with you. There's extreme physical contact, sexual undertones, real electric shock, religious themes, very tight spaces, and much more. Like most attractions I'll talk about in this video, you must sign a waiver before entering. The basement can get so disturbing that the attraction appropriately has a safe word to yell out if a patron happens to feel violated or too uncomfortable. The Cult was an attraction located in North Conway, New Hampshire. The Cult had been called the ultimate in terror, only for die-hard fans of true horror, for those who want the experience of real-life terror to test your fears. It was an hour-long attraction, and patrons had to walk through alone. Absolutely no groups allowed. Going through it, you would encounter violent situations, and the actors would lay hands on you many times. As the nervous patrons meet a man before entering the attraction who asks if they have any problems with darkness, heights, claustrophobia, eels, rats, bugs, needles, or being fully submerged in water, most of the patrons were already nervous of what they were getting themselves into. Patrons were given a red card on a lanyard. If one decided the experience was too much, they would give up their safety pass and it would be over. During the experience, patrons would be asked to step into a chairlift that led to a dirt path, which would then lead to a cabin where they would meet a man who would shove them into a booth, yell at them, spray them with unknown liquids, throw a bag over their heads, and then carry them outside, where the simulated torture continued. As patrons continued on, it only got worse. Throughout the attraction, patrons would encounter live animals, for example, being forced to have snakes or cockroaches crawl on them, forced edibles, for example, being forced to drink what the actors would claim as animal urine, extreme violence, and much more. The Cult has been closed since 2013.
Good.
The Blackout Haunted House was an attraction that had two locations, one in New York and one in California. It featured extreme violence, full frontal nudity, forced edibles, submersion in water, physical contact, and patrons had to enter alone. Patrons were abducted in vans, waterboarded, and even rolled naked in a sheet of plastic and forced to walk barefoot down a hallway. Said hallway would lead to a scene with a horrifically tall figure and frail woman. And if I described the scene, this video would probably get age restricted. As a patron would pass, the tall man would stand up, exposing his body, and then threaten to make physical contact with the patron. Blackout overall relied on darkness, loud noises, violence, and sexual situations to terrify its customers. Until around 2015, it had been a solo-only experience, but starting in, I believe, 2016 or 2017, patrons were allowed to enter in groups. It seems Blackout hasn't been open for the past 2 seasons.
Good. Shut them down.
Freakling Brothers Victim Experience 3 is a Las Vegas attraction featuring extended submersion in water, electric shock, and extreme physical contact. The Victim Experience is extremely intense, and you must go through alone. One patron said he watched a camouflaged attacker appear out of nowhere, grab his colleague by the foot, then knock her down and drag her down a long hallway as she screamed. He was left alone in the darkness until the attacker came back for him and threw him over his shoulder. Patrons will experience electric shock at some point, as well as the feeling of near drowning as they're submerged underwater for extended periods of time. As the title of the attraction suggests, once you enter, you are a victim. You will experience pain and you will be tied up, and you may be carried and thrown. Freakling Brothers actually run 3 haunted houses every year: Castle Vampire, Circus of Horrors, and Gates of Hell. The Gates of Hell became one of the first haunted houses in the country to be R-rated due to graphic content and their requirement of patrons to be over 18 and sign a waiver. The Victim Experience takes place in the Gates of Hell attraction, and it simulates what it would be believed to be like to die and actually go to hell. Without giving too much away, victims are put in several scenes where they're touched, forced to get down on their knees, and subjected to things that anyone would find uncomfortable. The Raven's Nest was one of the lesser-known extreme haunted houses, and it's been closed since 2009. It had been closed after it was deemed as too extreme by the town. Raven's Nest featured actors who were paid to induce pain on the patrons, as well as other humiliating methods of torture. The owner, Mike McNair, would hire mostly larger and more intimidating actors who would be capable of easily picking up, tying, or shoving patrons. Visitors would also be kicked to the floor and forced to do things like lick the ground, eat disgusting foods and liquids off the floor, and even have actors try to induce vomiting in the patrons. The attraction also played with claustrophobia, having patrons crawl through air vents filled with real cockroaches and spiders, as well as constant tight and cramped rooms and pathways. There was no safe word, which may have been a small factor in the eventual closing of the Raven's Nest. Many of you definitely have heard of this last one, McKamey Manor.
Fuck that.
This San Diego attraction, if it could even be called that, shouldn't even be in the same category as regular haunted house attractions. This place tops the list because it tends to use extreme scare tactics that are off limits to professional attractions. It also can't be said that what goes on in this place is safe. Participants are covered in blood, forced to eat disgusting things, threatened with power tools, stuffed in a clothes dryer, submerged in water for extended periods, physically assaulted, and even given an unwanted haircut. Participants often leave covered in blood, commonly their own, and so far nobody has made it through to the end. There used to be no safe word, and they would only pull the plug when medically necessary. This place plays with people's fears of claustrophobia with tight spaces and corridors, people's fears of spiders with restrained victims having up to or even more than 4 tarantulas crawling over their faces, people's fears of clowns, and just about anything else you could think of. Perhaps one of the more shocking parts is that the experience can go on for up to 10 hours, obviously a big contributor to why nobody's made it.
What? 10 hours?
To the end yet. For a long time, the place didn't have a safe word, and Russ, the owner, only added one after he was told he legally needed to. But even with this safe word, apparently the torture can go on for many people who repeatedly use the safe word, rendering it basically useless. McKamey Manor also garnered a lot of criticism regarding the $20,000 cash prize that they promised to anyone who can make it through to the end, with a lot of people believing they simply wouldn't allow anyone to win, because oftentimes the workers will decide for the patrons that they're done, even if the patron wants to keep going. McKamey Manor is self-described as a place for extreme horror lovers only, who wish to experience what true terror and gross-out torture feels like. But apparently there are a lot of people who wish to experience it, as there's a waiting list of more than 20,000 people.
What?
There's currently a Change.org petition to close down McKamey Manor for good, with over 180,000 signatures. Thousands of people shun this place for claiming to be a haunted house attraction, when they believe it's simply a torture chamber under disguise. Russ's 40-page waiver is also very questionable. He apparently misspells the word liable multiple times to attempt to make certain points of the waiver void. Whatever your thoughts on this place are, anyone would admit it's the definition of a horror attraction that takes it way too far.
That's nuts. Yeah, bro. I like, those are like, it's one thing to go to like haunted houses. I've been to haunted houses before. Like, don't get me wrong. Everybody likes to get a good scare, but I'm not going to pay to subject myself to fucking torture. Like, that's different, right? Like, it's one thing to get a nice little adrenaline rush, like, oh shit, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh goddamn. But to sit there and go through legit torture and shit, like, I'm not paying and signing waivers for that. Like, fuck out of here. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I hope that none of you guys want to do that shit either. So I ain't gonna ask if you would do it. So I'm just gonna make the assumption that y'all ain't doing that shit either, because we all ain't that crazy. You know what I'm saying? I hope not. God damn. Anyways, I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace. Be safe out there for Halloween too.